what I hope people take from my book, what I hope they take from this podcast, is that whatever your sin struggle is, the gospel makes room for it, but also the gospel is not just for a one-time decision. Say salvation is a lifeline, but sanctification is a lifetime, right? And we need the gospel every single day.
Welcome to the 423 podcast with 423 Communities, where we explore the intersection of faith, recovery, and restoration, equipping you to move from shame and addiction towards life in Christ.
Jon, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, I'm excited to be here. This is great.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.
Would love to learn a little about you. I don't know how much our audience is familiar with you, but
so I think a little backstory. So I'm at this conference, right? And Jon and I are giving workshops, and I'm walking down this hallway, and here's this incredibly handsome man
Who is much shorter than you.
that doesn't equate to handsomeness.
Okay, yeah.
I've learned that over the years. But I see the standard and this picture of Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic, and I look at your workshop title, and it's about radical vulnerability and engaging your story, and how all of us are wrestling with these various pieces of our story, and I'm like, this is a guy that I want to know. Mm-hmm. And so we just kind of struck up a conversation over the weekend and heard such great things about what you're doing. Previewed your book a little bit, and I have it right here. This is the Bible for today. And just was struck at just your journey, your story, the way that you have engaged your own recovery process through this. It reminded me so much of this is the book that I would write, but just overlay my journey with sexual addiction and pornography and acting out with kind of your journey through alcoholism. And I think coming from that same place of, that's just the symptom. That's just the overlay and the frame for the conversation that we're having about how we have become disordered creatures in this world and how we are in this constant and continual journey back into who God created us to be. And so I would love, Jon, just to kind of walk through your book and through your story for our listeners, for our communities, just to get a taste of the truths that are in this book, but also just to reflect on where God has led you thus far. So, Jon.
Yes.
Give
here
us
we go.
Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic, which is a bold title, by the way.
Yeah.
I love the title. It's grabbing.
Bold move, Cotton.
Yeah, it's like the beer can or the Olipop. That's what I think. Olipop can,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So tell us what led to this moment.
Yeah. So first of all, let me just say I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited that you said what you said, because I tell people, take alcoholic out of the title. And so if you're listening to this and your struggle isn't alcohol, don't tune out if you haven't already.
Yeah.
If you're still here, don't tune out now, because you can really put anything there.
Yeah.
Confessions of a Christian workaholic, Confessions of a Christian adulterer, porn addict, bulimic, anything, right? Alcohol is just the vehicle that I use to talk about what you said, which is that we all are addicted to something.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think I say that and you agree with that. You just did. And I don't think you're lying.
Nope.
And yet there are so many people who that really rubs them the wrong way. And I've gotten that feedback. They're like, keep it about yourself. We're not all addicted to something. And I'm like, well, your addiction is pride.
Well, I'd say that's probably one of the number one pushbacks that we get for our ministry is guys saying, "Oh, I'm not a sex addict like those guys.
Yes. Yep.
I'm not addicted like you might have been." But I think your premise goes a lot deeper than just what we commonly think of as an addict to something.
John Calvin, kind of this really important figure in church history,
Familiar.
said our hearts are idol factories. We are all building idols, right? Yeah. And ultimately, any addiction, any problem is a worship disorder. And the world doesn't like to hear that, by the way, right? Because I've been told, well, you're about moralism. You're trying to get people to just if they only follow Jesus correctly, then they'll be fine. And I'm like, well, first of all, no one follows Jesus correctly. This is a lifelong struggle, right? But in the end, we all have a worship disorder. We all have an addiction, and we all don't have just one addiction, right? So what I'm realizing too is, as I have gone through this journey of now being 2.5 years sober, I don't have just one problem, right? If I had just one problem, then I could say, and this is where, my book, and I'll get into this, differs from the secular world and secular programs, is that if I only have one problem, then once I stop doing that thing, I am fine.
Yeah.
And I think that is where a lot of secular programs fall short, right? When I speak to groups, and, they'll bus in AA or 12-step groups, I'll say, how many of you know a miserable sober person? And they'll, I get so many hands raised, right? And I say, the secular programs end there. Like, they are giving you a round of applause because you're not drinking.
You got the 90-day chip, the 2-year chip.
Yeah, 90 and 90, baby.
Yeah.
Listen, I was talking to a guy on the way here, not a Christian, right? And he's like, I don't know how to stop drinking. Of course, my advice, and by the way, he's tried and he has gone through withdrawal symptoms. And I'm like, you need to get on the phone with your doctor, because if you try to quit cold turkey, there's a good chance you will die, right?
Yeah.
Because his body is so physically addicted, right? When that guy stops drinking, yes, I'm going to applaud him. But that's not where it's going to stop, right? My ultimate goal for him is not to stop drinking. It is a goal. My ultimate goal for him is to find Jesus, right? And I'll get into this in a little bit. So all that, I just wanted to give that background because I think that sets the stage for a good part of my story.
Yeah.
Which now we shall get into.
There you
right?
go. We're starting.
And so, so I think I grew up in Wisconsin,
Yeah.
which is literally the drinking capital of the country, if not the world.
Wow.
And, we are very proud of that in Wisconsin. I asked someone I had on my podcast, which is also called Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic, and someone from Wisconsin, and I said, describe the drinking culture to people who aren't from Wisconsin. And they had a really good quote. They said, that is the culture, right? So that was the backdrop for a lot of my life, right? In fact, when I wrote my book, Joel, you talked about just a few minutes ago, the fact that, well, at least I don't look like that, right?
Yeah.
Chapter 2 in my book is all about redefining alcoholism and what it looks like to be an addict, right? And using even some of the medical community has changed, even how they do that, right? And I remember someone from back home in Wisconsin when the book first came out, and they read a copy. They said, well, by your definition, everyone in Wisconsin is an alcoholic. And I'm like, well, first of all, it's not my definition. Like, I literally use the medical community who changed how they do it in 2013. And yeah, you're kind of right. But in the end, and I talk about this, I love when science catches up to the Bible, is the Bible would say, my paraphrase, but anything that is misordered is disordered.
Yeah.
Right? Like, anything you put on the throne of your heart that is not God is a misordered relationship with food, sex, pleasure, escape, whatever, right?
Yeah.
That is a disorder of the heart. What's interesting, in 2013, what's called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, the Bible for treating mental health disorders, of which addiction is, changed the questions and the criteria they use for determining if you have what is now called alcohol use disorder. And it's no longer called alcoholism. It's no longer binary. You either are or you aren't. It's on a spectrum. Just like, autism, it's on a spectrum, right? You can have people who are, level 3, 4. I think it goes up to 4. Maybe it only goes up to 3, but, or level 1, right?
Sure.
And so just the same way, you have people who are on a spectrum of alcohol use disorder. And I think what we fail to grasp is that because it's on a spectrum now, it doesn't have to look like the traditional way that we think it looks like.
Sure.
Right? So going back, growing up in Wisconsin, I would say there's a lot of people who have a misordered relationship with alcohol. Misordered equals disordered, according to the Bible. And now, according, again, if you look at those questions, it repeats, again, the science catching up, it repeats, if you will, that same concept.
Yeah.
Because now those questions, they're not even questions, they're statements. And if you agree with those statements, or if those statements describe you, there's 11, only 2. You only need 2 for you to be considered on the spectrum.
Okay.
And what all of those statements get at, sure, quantity is one way to determine if you've got a problem with alcohol.
Yeah.
But that's just one, right? See, we think it's all about quantity. And so we say, as long as I'm not drinking this much, or my drinking doesn't look like this,
Yeah.
I'm good. As long as my porn or sex addiction doesn't look like this, I'm not going out to the street corner and getting prostitutes. I'm fine.
Yeah. Or
Right?
comparison, right? Comparison with others who were in that same space.
Absolutely.
Well, that guy is way worse. With all that mental gymnastics that
Absolutely.
we do.
Right? And so everything comes down to this concept of misordered is disordered. So now with that in mind, growing up in Wisconsin, I would say I always had a misordered relationship with alcohol.
Sure.
Throughout my life, that misordered, disordered relationship looked different. There were times I would drink more, times I'd drink less. But I tended to drink more when I was stressed out, when I didn't know how to cope with life.
Sure.
Yeah.
And here's what I would say. My ultimate addiction comes down to this: escapism. So when I would hit really hard parts of my life, I would drink more.
Right.
When that would kind of abate, I'd be like, oh, I can pull back. And if I can pull back, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm not an alcoholic. Alcoholics can't pull back. Alcoholics can't stop for a week or 2. They can't give it up for a month. I didn't have the shakes when I stopped. Alcoholics get the shakes, right?
Yeah.
I had other withdrawal symptoms, but I didn't talk about that, right?
Right.
But I didn't have the shakes for whatever reason in my mind. I think that's a Hollywood thing, and I talk about this a little bit in the book. You know, Hollywood says, again, they help perpetuate this idea that alcoholism looks like one way.
Yeah.
So I always knew I had this misordered, disordered relationship with alcohol. Now, I wouldn't said it at the time. It's kind of looking back. And so during times of I got drunk for the first time in my preteen to early teenage years.
Yeah.
And for some people, they get drunk the first time and it just starts this, downward spiral from the moment.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case for me. I got drunk, and actually, because I had undiagnosed anxiety and OCD, it scared me because I got blackout drunk and I couldn't remember. And I was like, my OCD, which manifests partly in like, this is going to sound funny, but if you have OCD, you get this, is manifest in like, did I kill someone? So like sometimes like in an OCD spiral, I would like hit a bump in my truck and I'd circle the block multiple times. Except like I hit someone, right? So when I got drunk the first time, I was convinced because I couldn't remember anything, did I go kill someone? Like that was literally one of my thoughts. And so that scared me.
Yeah.
So I didn't really start drinking until I turned 21. Or really drinking to excess, But once I turned 21, and I hit a really hard time in my life around that time, where my fiance at the time was in a study abroad. I was living with 6 other guys in an apartment in Brooklyn where like there was drive-by shootings and there were robberies at the bodega down the street. Like we literally feared for our safety.
Yeah.
And that's the first time I remember really turning to alcohol in a period of stress, and my body remembered what happened the first time I got drunk in this way. I could turn my mind off. See, that first time I got drunk, I was going through a lot of stress at home, a lot of stress with my family. And even though it scared me, I remember, man, when I got drunk, at least for that evening, I didn't have to think about anything else.
Yeah.
I could be free.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what that time showed me, and then what those times subsequent, 21 and older, is I could shut my mind off. I could stop thinking about what I didn't want to think about. Now, once I was officially diagnosed with anxiety and OCD, I would say it got better in that I got on medication. I started finding other coping mechanisms and tools where I could shut my I could shut my mind off.
Yeah.
Right? Great. But because I never really got to the root of the problem, it always stuck around.
Yeah.
And so, in 2021, I write a best-selling book on faith and mental health called Finding Rest. And that book was about how to be a Christian that struggles with mental health, what it looks like to combat that, how do you do that well. And what I would say is that book really covered the hardest part of my life up to that point. And in a great way, it talked about how to handle that, how to deal with that. What I didn't realize is that an even harder part of my life was about to unfold. And when that happened, the tools that I thought were good enough, I didn't rely on. And I should say they would have been good enough if I just would have used them. Right. But here's the thing. Alcohol is cheap and easy form of escape.
Yeah.
Like, if it wasn't effective, people wouldn't use it.
Yeah.
It is very effective. So 2021, the book comes out. I have a buddy who calls me who had published a few books, and he said, hey, you need to be careful. And I said, okay, what? He said, you're going to publish your book, and you're going to feel a little lost. It's like you've been working on this thing for years, and it kind of is, it's like Ricky Bobby, from Talladega Nights. You're going to be there, and you're going to be like, what do I do with my hands, And I was like, thanks, but I think I'll be good. And sure enough, I published the book. It comes out, and it's kind of like the other way to compare it is like it's a professional athlete that retires. They don't know what to do with themselves.
Yeah.
Or they had expectations. I'm gonna win 7 Super Bowls. Maybe they only won 1. Maybe they won 0. Maybe they're the Dan Marino, right? And I started feeling that letdown. I realized I had expectations for the book that were really unrealistic, or there was grass is greener syndrome. It was like, I got on this bestseller list. I mean, the book became #1 in several categories on Amazon.
Yeah.
Top 100 books on all of Amazon, right? I mean, I'm beating like Oprah in certain stuff, right? And yet, I'm like, yeah, but I didn't get on the New York Times bestseller list. Yeah, I got this interview, they flew me down to be on Mike Huckabee's show, right? But I didn't get Fox. And so I started feeling this letdown. And in those moments of unrealized and unmet expectations, the devil started whispering lies to me. And they were lies, and he's crafty like this, right? I mean, we see this in the garden. They were lies that went to the core of who I was, that then went back to traumas and wounds from as far back as when I was 6.
Yeah.
And what I didn't realize is how quickly I started believing those lies. People don't really love you. People don't really like you. They don't want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
You're a failure. You're a fraud. You're a fake. If this was really what you were supposed to do, then it would have done this.
Yeah.
If it, maybe this happened, but You're not getting emails for speaking engagements. So obviously, like, these were pity buys, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like everything,
All
right?
the different things. Yeah.
And I started believing them.
Mm.
And again, like, I had all the tools to
Right.
combat those lies,
Mm.
but it put me in such a dark place, in such a dark spot, that I started to supplement. Right. So yeah, I would still run a little bit. Right. I knew, like, for my mental health, I need to run. I would. There was all the stuff that I would practice
Yeah.
that was in my first book. But then I just kind of started supplementing. You know, a drink every night, drink every other day, right? Or drink every night, a nightcap. You know,
Right.
just to kind of help take the edge off. Well, then that one nightcap turned into 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And then 9 o'clock turned into 5 o'clock. And then 5 o'clock turned into 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah.
And then 5 o'clock somewhere turns into 1. And so 2021, that starts happening with the book. I had my own business, and I was consulting. My background is in news and digital media. Worked with some really cool people and organizations like I Am Second and The Blaze, and helped start that news organization. And so I kind of used all of what I had accumulated over the years to just consult and help people. I had this massive client, and this client, they like kind of kept doing the thing where they're like, hey, we want more of your time. And I'm like, okay, but if you want more of my time, it's going to cost this. And I kept throwing out numbers, and they kept saying yes. And I'm like, this is awesome, right?
Yeah.
And by the end of 2021, I'm making the most money of my life. I don't think I will ever make that much money in my life again, right? And 2 weeks before Christmas, that client, who is now my biggest client and practically my only client because they're taking up so much of my time, they come to me and say, hey, we're redoing things. We're kind of rebuilding this whole thing. And so you're a contractor, and your contract is up at the end of the year. And I'm like, and I don't blame them. Like, I get it. But I'm like, 2 weeks before Christmas, like, you know, anyone who's done client work, you try to find a client 2 weeks before, a new client 2 weeks before Christmas. You know, I joke
Good
that, like,
luck.
there's the doldrums period of, like, the week before Thanksgiving to the second week in January. and
Nothing
everyone's
happens,
like, we'll talk to you after the holidays.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the phrase you get.
Yeah.
And so I was already in a dark place, sent me even darker. Fast forward to the spring. My son, 4 years old at the time, starts limping around. We take him to the doctor. They say he's fine. My wife is like, he is not fine.
Yeah.
We take him to a pediatric orthopedic specialist. They take a x-ray. They're like, you need to go to Children's Hospital. We go to Children's Hospital. They take an MRI, and it's kind of like one of those moments out of a movie where you're like, all of a sudden, you show up for an MRI, and now you're meeting with a pediatric oncologist, and they say, hey, your son has a tumor in his leg. And even though that tumor ended up being benign by God's grace, that whole process was just, you want to talk about not knowing and how to handle and understand things. Even though in some ways I was saying the right things, you know, God's got us, you know, whatever. And, you know, there's aspects of you that believe that.
Totally.
But then there's aspects of you that at 9 o'clock at night, when it's dark outside and everything's closing in, you're like, do I believe that?
Yeah.
Is that true? God, are you good? No matter what? I don't know. But Jim can help me over there. Mr. Jim Beam, you know, can help me believe that a little bit. And so slowly, I call it a slow fade, and that's a whole chapter in the book. A slow fade of, and you guys are getting the full story today.
Yeah. Down.
Is I start drinking more and more and earlier and earlier. And it takes more and more to get me to the place that I need to get to, to not think about all the crap going on.
Yeah.
And so that period of my life, from 2021, the fall of 2021 to the spring of 2023, I call my severe slide period. So up until then, it was kind of up and down. You know, again, I can look back and say I had that disordered relationship with alcohol. But where it really started looking, in a sense, like the traditional quote unquote alcoholic, was 2021 to 2023. Fast forward to 2023, May. My wife and I's anniversary is Memorial Day weekend. And so we always kind of have a built-in holiday to celebrate. And so we always try to pick someplace cool and new, and who would pick Miami. And so we fly down to Miami. We get a hotel right on South Beach. And I had actually 2 weeks earlier been like, I think I'm an alcoholic. I told my wife that. And my wife has always been of the mindset, and this will come out in just a little bit even clearer, of like, it's not about her guilting me into anything. It's not about her being my babysitter or the Holy Spirit. Like, I truly have to embrace it. So when I said 2 weeks earlier, I think I'm an alcoholic, I think she was like, okay, we'll see. In the sense of like, we'll see what you do with this. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you are. Maybe you're not. Yeah. Like, it was just kind of like, you know, and she had heard me say, I need to quit, or I need to cut back before. And I'd also done it in like a group setting. And so she was kind of not embarrassed, like, how dare you say that, but like, how dare you kind of put me on the spot like that?
Sure. Like,
where I have to react in front of people, you know, which looking back was kind of, well, I mean, she was right. Like, that wasn't fair. And so I had quit. I quote unquote quit.
Yeah.
But again, alcoholics can't quit for 2 weeks. I did. I obviously don't have a problem then. Or I don't have as much of a problem as I thought I did. I can do this, meaning drink, you know, I can drink in moderation or whatnot. So we go on to Miami, and I'm like, I'll just drink in the evenings, right? And so I didn't drink during the day. Again, alcoholics can't not drink during the day and only drink at night. Duh.
Everyone knows that.
And so there comes one night, and I would drink, I'd get a little buzz, but, you know, I'm reining it in. One night, two days into the trip, she's like, hey, let's have a night in. I just want to, like, chill. She's more of an introvert. She loves her books. And she's like, you can do whatever you want. But again, I'm not a party drinker. I'm a shut my mind off drinker. So she says you can go do whatever you want. Well, that to me is like the most beautiful thing I could do, is to just be alone and drink, right? Not go out to the club, not go on the boardwalk, not go, you know, whatever. So I say, all right, I'm just going to go down to the hotel bar. I'll have a couple appetizers. There's NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs. I'll watch the games, have some apps, have some drinks. Life is good.
Yeah.
And as I'm leaving the hotel room, she looks at me and she says, don't get drunk. And I can tell you with everything that's in me, when I promised not to get drunk that night, I truly believed it. I said, I will not get drunk, I promise. And I would have passed a lie detector. I really would have. Go down to the hotel bar. I have my first drink, and I can't tell you how many I have after that. By the end of the night, which is really the beginning of the next morning, I have a triple-digit bar tab that I'm like, holy crap, how did this get here? And I am wasted. And I'm like, I cannot go back to the hotel room like this. I promised her I was not going to get drunk. So I think I need to sober up. So my drunk self stumbles from the hotel bar across the street to South Beach, which I don't know if you've ever been down to South Beach, Miami at 1 a.m. in the morning. Way more people there than you think. And I get down there, and pretty quickly I have to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, I can't make it back to the hotel. There's a lot of people around here. Like, what am I going to do? And drunk John looks and says, well, the world's biggest toilet is in front of me. So with all my clothes on, I wade into the ocean up to like my neck, start going to the bathroom, and it starts coming out of both ends. And I just have this moment of clarity of like, what has your life become?
Yeah.
You are literally sitting here wading in your own feces after truly setting out not to get drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but this is what happens.
Mm.
Like, it has gotten to this point where you can say to yourself, self, don't get drunk, and self gets drunk.
Yeah.
Like, the only drink I can say no to is the first one. And I get up the next morning. My wife asks me, did you get drunk? And I lie to her so quickly, so easily. And I call it my Peter moment, because 2 other times, or total 3 times throughout the day, she asked me, did you get drunk last night? And I said, no. And we go throughout the day, and it is just eating me up. It is just eating me up. We get to dinner that night, and I finally am just like, hey, babe, I got to tell you something. I got drunk last night. And she goes, I know you did. She goes, but I needed to hear you tell me the truth, and you didn't. Pay the bill. We actually end up walking down to the beach, close to where I was the night before. And I'm making all the promises, man. I'm like, I'm never going to drink again. I know I need help. Once I start, I can't stop. Like, all the stuff. And we sit down, and she looks at me, and she goes, Jon, I don't care if you ever drink again. That's not my goal. If you never have another drink, but you don't get to the bottom of why you're drinking, if you don't get to the root, if you can't figure out why you can't sit with yourself and be with your own thoughts, if every time we get to now a hard part of life that you can't handle it without turning to alcohol, what's the point?
Yeah.
Like, it's just going to be something else. Sure, take out alcohol, but then what? Right? What are you going to turn to? And so I'm kind of like, well, can we go back to the not drinking part? Like, that'd be easier.
Yeah.
Like, can I just promise you never to drink again? Because I don't want to have to. I don't want to have to go there.
Mm-mm.
And I think there's a lot of us who don't want to go there, and people who are listening, right? Like, we don't want to go there.
Well, I think that's that whole story, and thank you for letting sharing that deep part of that story with us, and was excited just to let you go and hear your journey, because I think all of our listeners and anyone who has ever struggled with disordered parts of themselves identifies with those moments, right, of wrestling with those pain moments and the mental gymnastics of telling yourself that it's not that bad, and getting to those moments. And that's a very graphic depiction of the bottom of the barrel, being in the world's biggest toilet.
Yeah.
Just, literally neck deep in your own story, in your own filth. And, one of the things that you said in your book that really resonated with me was one that you unpacked, that there's the behavioral addiction, that you became an addict to the consumption and what the process was, and there's this physiological response in your system. But then you talk about that there's a cultural problem, and there's a mental problem, and there's a spiritual problem, and all of these layers that build out what it is that you were wrestling with. And a lot of what we talk about with our listeners, and even in our own stories, is how complex the journey is for all of us that are wrestling with these things. That it's not simply that you need to stop drinking, but that there are layers upon layers upon layers that cultivated you to that moment of being in that seat and having that conversation with your wife. We talk about it as the concept of andness, that in that moment, like in that sea moment where you're in your own filth, you are also a man who loves your wife.
Yeah.
And you are a man who loves God. And you are a man who wants to be on this path of God's purpose and plan for your life. And you're also someone who has succumbed to the disease, the process, the pathway of addiction in your story. And then you write this, all of these things fueling this disordered desire and this pain point in your heart. You write, trauma created wounded and scared parts of me called exiles that were never healed. I think a lot of us have these wounds that turn into those exiled parts of us. Many times they develop early on in life, although not always. And when left unhealed, these wounds create chaos, right? And when you're sharing your story, I'm just thinking of that is the definition of chaos, mentally, behaviorally, relationally, spiritually. And so I'd kind of just love to kind of almost rewind a little bit in your story, of where did those moments of you know, you mentioned your first drink was in your youth. Like, what were those disordered parts? What were those wounds? What were those unhealed trauma moments that kind of created this chaos cycle in your life that led you to that point with your wife on the beach that day?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, because from that day on the beach, you know, my commitment to my wife was to get to the bottom of it, right? So I literally, on the beach that night, sent an email to a Christian trauma therapist that I had been kind of looking at. And I said, hey, I think I have a problem, but I know what I think these, there's something deeper here.
Yeah.
And that kind of started this year-long journey of in-depth really going. And what I learned is that I think it's such a helpful way, internal family systems therapy, IFS.
Yeah. We utilize that within our program. Yeah.
Which talks about the parts of ourselves. And here's the thing. We can have, you know, healed, healthy parts of ourselves. The healed, healthy parts of myself, wrote a best-selling book on faith and mental health.
Yeah.
Right? Traveled the country, did podcasts, like all that stuff, right? But then there are those wounded parts of ourselves, those parts that are unhealed that we say, you know what? I'm not going there, let alone am I letting someone else in there, a counselor, Jesus, right? Like, like, you know, describe it like this. Like you invite someone over to your house and you're like, I'll clean up the kitchen, I'll clean up the living room, but man, I'm shutting that door to the bedroom. I don't want to deal with that, right? I'm shutting the door to the kids' room, right? Like, but what we don't realize is that mess that's in those rooms, it doesn't stay there, right? That hot pocket that's in your kids' room that's like fermenting into some science experiment, like that smell is eventually going to waft into the quote-unquote clean living room. It's going to bring in mice, and those mice don't just stay there, right? They go into other parts, right? And in fact, some of us might even, you know, for the holidays, we're like, hey, the whole family's coming over. You might ask your sister, hey, can you come over and help me clean the house? And so you might even be willing to have someone look at certain parts and help you clean up that living room and that kitchen. But again, you're walling off, you're closing the door to those other parts. That's what I had done.
Yeah.
And those other parts were parts that I realized had been wounded at a very young age. You know those lies that I talked about, right? That the devil was whispering to me. Well, you know, that happens like when I start, when the devil says you're not worth it, right? Well, part of that goes back to the fact that like my worth and self-value was shattered. My innocence was shattered, you know, as young as 6, when my older sister molested me, right? And I didn't know what to do with that, right? And then it kept going, right? And then it didn't stop. And then you like, you want it to stop, and you think that maybe you're kind of communicating something, and it doesn't stop. And my stepdad, who went through a radical change, his own radical change in life, but before that, you know, was abusive.
Yeah.
Right. And so, as you know, like we can't make sense of that. Our brains don't know how to make sense of that. Right. Yeah. So what happens is at 6, I'm realizing I don't know how to make sense of it. I just need to escape it. I can't physically run away. Right. So I mentally check out.
Yeah. Right.
And well, at 6, I'm mentally checking out with, you know, Tonka Toys and Barney. At 36, I'm mentally checking out with tequila and bourbon. So what happened is that that trauma created a habit and pattern of escapism.
Yeah.
How come I didn't know at 36 how to sit with my own feelings? Because at 6, I didn't know how to sit with my own feelings. And in order to cope with that, I turned to other things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so what I realized is like those unhealthy parts of myself, those unhealed, those wounded parts of myself didn't know how to sit with uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah.
So when I hit the hardest period of my life in 2021, the other stuff that I had used to cope, the healthy stuff, wasn't good enough anymore.
Yeah.
Right? And so I needed that supplement. And so I needed to start turning to something like I had to bring in something outside of myself.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to drink.
Yeah.
And it's really effective again. So that's when I talk about those wounded, unhealed, traumatized parts of myself. That's what I'm talking about. And we all have those, right? Like we can be those, like so many of us can operate for a long time or a majority of the time out of those healed parts. I'd given so much of myself over to Jesus.
Yeah.
Right. But then when those really hard times come, if we haven't given them over, we turn to those other things.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the concepts that we talk about with all forms of just disordered living, is your alcohol dependency and your abuse of that. It's not just that the symptom needs to be resolved. It's that there is that process of healing that needs to happen. And oftentimes we talk about even sexual addiction being a developmental tragedy, right? That you're struggling at 36 or 37 with an unhealthy sexual behavior is a developmental tragedy that began at 6 years old, 6, 7 years old. Yeah. 8 years old, exposed to pornography, disrupted family system, all these core identities and these core roots and these core narratives of shame and self, built this pattern of I have to cope with these, internal narratives within me in some form to be able to escape and make it through life. And so when we're talking about, I think you wrote this here, talking about ending some of those bad behaviors, right? Those unhealthy behaviors with alcohol. I just wrote, white-knuckled abstinence is not restoration. You said, in the end, even though I wasn't drinking, those periods where you were abstaining from drinking, you said it was still consuming my mind. And that's still a disordered relationship with alcohol, and that's cognitive dissonance. And I think that's that you're giving language to that moment where, you could be sober, but you're not healed.
Yes.
Right. And healing comes when we go back to those places of learning how to reorder our desires, or really kind of as we talk about going back into who you were created to be in innocence, as a being created with those core desires for love and safety and soothing and being with in a safe environment with people. So what was the process like for you of kind of learning how to, move away from a disordered, misordered relationship with not just alcohol, but with yourself? And what was that like for you to kind of begin to be restored in who you were before trauma disordered your existence?
Yeah, and this is why, and I talk about this a little bit in the book. I've even started talking more about it recently. Is why I think secular programs will always fall short. Not that they can't help you stop drinking, right?
Yep.
But again, going back to what I was laying the foundation with is like, that is not my ultimate goal, right? So for me, I think what was really important in getting to the root was untangling who I had become and where those lies had really taken root. And I don't think you can do that without Jesus, right? Yeah. I know you can, right? Fully, right? Yeah. Are there people...
The higher power,
Are there people out there who are like, John, you tell me that I can't have the most flourishing, fulfilled life without Jesus, but I'm really flourishing and fulfilled. And I'd be like, you may think you are.
Or common graces, right? Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're...
Sure. Yeah. But man, there's even... You think it's good now? Yeah. There's something even better waiting for you. Right? So, I think, secular programs make sobriety the goal. What I want for people is Jesus is the goal. So to your question, how did I start untangling that? I finally shot for Jesus. And that may seem kind of odd for a Christian to say, but I think, I say I'm the Christian that became an alcoholic, not the other way around. And we're generally fine with the other way around. We have a box for that. The alcoholic who becomes a Christian, the porn addict who becomes a Christian, the porn star who becomes a Christian, right? And what we don't have a box for is for people who love and follow Jesus, but still, because of those unhealed, wounded, traumatized parts of it. And I'm not saying necessarily like hear me out. I'm not saying everyone's been traumatized as a 6-year-old, you know?
I would say that.
Well, what I would say is trauma at its core is the sin and brokenness of the world.
Exactly, yeah.
So have you experienced sin and broken? Your trauma may not look like mine, right? It may not be being molested at 6, right? Yep. But do you think you've experienced the sin and the brokenness of the world growing up? Well, the answer is we all have, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, that's a little bit of a tangent. So I had to go to finally shooting for Jesus. C.S. Lewis talks about in Mere Christianity. He says, aim for heaven and you'll get the earth thrown in. You aim for the earth, you may or may not get it, right? I wrote this article that said, how was I able to finally stop drinking? I finally stopped trying to stop drinking, right?
Yeah.
I finally made it about more than just getting rid of the behavior, which ironically I've had, and even other Christians who are kind of bigger in the secular addiction world have told me, hey, you like all this stuff we're talking about Jesus, like it's just about, you're just making it about moral behavior. And I'm like, no, you are.
Yeah.
You're the one that's making it about behavior modification. You say that if you only just stop, then you're good.
Yeah.
Like that's moralism.
Yeah, truly.
I'm saying, no, you shoot for Jesus, right? And it's not about adhering to certain principles or what, it's about grace, right? So in that year, especially after hitting, what I call my rock bottom moment, is I really did 4 steps. And it's not like I sat down after I got home from the beach, on that trip and said, okay, these are the 4 things I'm going to do. But after about a year into it, when the Lord told me, hey, you need to write about this. And I said, hell no. And lost that battle though. Yeah.
Classic.
And he's like, this is kind of the journey I took you through. And so those 4 steps are abiding in Christ, finding your true identity, practicing radical vulnerability, and being obedient. And it was those 4 things that I did that really led me to true and lasting freedom, which, by the way, I want to clarify, doesn't mean an absence of struggle or temptation.
Right.
I think in the evangelical world, especially, I love my charismatic friends. I grew up charismatic, Pentecostal. There is this idea that victory in Jesus, what that means is, A, you don't talk about your past life. B, you don't talk about your current struggles, because any admission of those 2 things means that you don't truly have freedom.
Right.
Are there people that I know who have been miraculously and radically delivered from any and all sense of desire for the thing? Yes. Is that most people's story? No. So what I tell people is they'll be like, do you still struggle with wanting to drink? I would say from time to time, but really my struggle is towards that escapism.
Yeah.
So that may look like wanting to drink, but it also may look like wanting to go buy a vape or a nicotine pouch and pop that in, because for just that 30 seconds, I get that freedom. It may look like, scrolling on Instagram to those accounts that I know, hey, this isn't porn, but it's, because that gives me escape. Right? So my desire is still bent towards escapism, right? But I'm continuing now to try to root out, those things that go deeper. Yeah. So it was really about practicing those 4 steps, and then practically, in those 4 steps, there was seeing a Christian trauma therapist every week. It was EMDR therapy, which I did, and practicing it in a Christian way, which for me looked like towards the end of those EMDR sessions, my therapist would literally invite Jesus in.
Yeah.
Hey, imagine, okay, now invite Jesus into that scenario, that scene, that whatever. And what is he saying? What is the truth? How is he redeeming that?
Yeah.
So I think that was important for me. And then it was the IFS therapy, right?
Yeah.
Really understanding that. And I want to be clear about this because there are some people who give me pushback in the Christian world. And, I look at IFS, I look at EMDR, I look at any type of therapy through the lens of Scripture, right?
Absolutely.
Not looking at Scripture through the lens of therapy, right? Looking at therapy through the lens of Scripture. And what that means for me is that certainly, I think there are common graces that the Lord has given us, like EMDR therapy, like IFS, that can be helpful. Does every single person resonate with EMDR or IFS therapy? No.
Yeah.
But what I have found is that it really helps unlock the truth of Scripture.
Yeah.
So, for example, when Paul talks in Romans 7, I understood, because of IFS therapy, I understood Romans 7 in a way that just was like what I can only imagine taking LSD is like. You know what I mean? Like,
Foreign.
I'm like seeing things in a great way. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Paul is talking about the parts of himself,
Yeah.
right?
That was one of my favorite things. One of the sections of your book, you talk about the Christian idea of sanctification. And are you really a Christian? Were you a Christian? Was I a Christian? I had that asked to me after I fell significantly. Did you actually know Jesus? And I was like, yeah, pretty sure I did. But that, our definition of sanctification, I think you say it in your book, is learning to identify those parts of us that are still disordered and learning how to submit them to the new life that's in Christ. It's reordering them into who we're called to be. And that's such a beautiful picture for those of us who are going to be struggling and wrestling against this world until we enter into our rest, right? And that's such a different perspective than I think most of the Christian world maintains, is that sanctification process of submitting those little parts, those exiled parts, those wounded parts, those trauma stories into submission to the work that Christ is doing. That's such a powerful truth.
It's true.
That term sanctification, maybe there's some people who are listening who haven't heard that. It's that ongoing. It's a churchy term, a seminary term for that ongoing process of becoming more like Jesus.
Yeah,
very simple, right? And yet, okay, so maybe you're like, oh, okay, I haven't heard sanctification, but yeah, I've heard about becoming more like Jesus. What we tend to do, and what a lot of Christians tend to do, is they say, okay, sanctification, becoming more like Jesus, makes room for the little sins, the little things, you know what, I don't flip people off in traffic like I used to. I became a Christian and now my road rage is so much better, right? But what they don't realize is that it's also for the big sins, the quote unquote big sins, right? It's for the adulterer. It's for, I'm going to say it, the pedophile.
Yeah.
It is for, the alcoholic. And when I say that, some people freak out. I'm sorry, but God's grace is available
Amen.
To the worst sinners and the worst sins. That does not mean that there are not consequences.
Sure.
Totally.
Right? I'm just going to say this one. The pedophile, right? The consequences for that person's sin, they cannot serve in children's ministry. Now, that's just one of them, right?
Right.
Sure.
They may need to actually go to jail, right?
Yeah.
I say grace and sanctification is not a get out of jail free card. In fact, you may have to go to jail for the things you did.
Yeah.
Right? I had a podcast recently with a guy who was he won a World Series ring with the Boston Red Sox. He was pitching in the minor leagues, and he had been sober for years, leading the Fellowship of Christian Athletes on the team, but just started drinking a little bit again. Culminates in a night out where he ends up drunk in a woman's apartment trying to get in bed with her. he goes to jail for attempted rape. And he's like, I should have gone to jail. He went to prison for years. He's like, and I should have. People, he's like, people in prison would have been like, man, you didn't do anything really that bad. You just got, he's like, no. He's like, stop it. No, I deserve to go to prison. That's the consequence for my actions, right? So I want to be clear. Like, God's grace is not a get out of jail free card, right?
Yeah.
But it still applies, right? Yeah. There is still, repentance and restoration that is possible, right? Again, you may have to live with the consequences of that. I'm still living with some of the consequences of my actions, right? My wife and I are still in marriage counseling, right? We're still working through some of that. From now we're going on, 2.5 years sober, right? Yeah. And it's kind of like compared to like a car accident. If anyone's gotten a car accident, like in the moment, your adrenaline's going and they're like, you good? You're like, yeah, I'm good. And then you get home and once your body has time to come down and you realize, oh my gosh, like my arm, my neck, like everything is sore. Yeah. And that's kind of like where my wife and I are now. Like the adrenaline has come down. Like we're like, oh my gosh, this is great. Okay. But now it's like we're feeling some of those pains, those bumps and bruises and maybe some of those broken bones that we didn't realize were there. So that sanctification process is an important aspect of the Christian faith that we say we get as a church and as Christians, but when the rubber meets the road and we're forced to really be like, do we believe that? We shirk back.
It's hard.
We shirk back from ourselves too.
Yeah.
Like we have a hard time extending grace to ourselves as well.
Most definitely.
Yeah,
Most definitely.
Absolutely.
No, I love the way you describe the journey as not just one of sin management and kind of back to how you're talking about in the secular communities of recovery of like, just get rid of the problem and then you'll be okay. But how, all right, the gospel in reality is to love God with all of yourself, to love your neighbor as yourself. And of course, we can only do that through Jesus. But I think people miss the second half of that we have to love our neighbor as ourselves. If we don't know how to love ourselves, then, right, like we're not going to be able to extend that love to others. So on this journey, I would just love to hear, like, how have you come to love yourself, or more, maybe put it in a way that's easier for the Christian ears to hear, is like, how have you been able to see yourself as a beloved son of God?
And so I say this in the book is like, God only ever works through sinners. There was only one guy he worked through that wasn't a sinner. Jesus happened to also be God, right? But other than that, every single person in the Bible, every hero of the faith, the Hebrews 11, wall of faith, they all struggled. Like Abraham, who is credited to him as righteousness because he believed and had faith. And yet, how many examples in the Bible, in his story, do we have of him not having faith? Let's take the 2 times. I say 2 because he messed it up once and he did it again. He didn't trust God, that God would take care of him when he goes to Pharaoh and goes to another ruler. And so he lies and tells both of these people that his wife is actually his sister. And it gets him in a lot of trouble. Like Pharaoh's like, "What are you doing?" Pharaoh's like, "I almost took your wife." Like, and I would have been like cursed. Like, and then Abraham's like, "Oh, sorry," and then does it again, right? So David, what he did with Bathsheba is rape.
Yeah.
Like he used his power, he used his control. He sends for her. Like, what is she gonna do? No, sorry. Like, no. Like he rapes her. Right? And then kills her husband, right? And so I think when you look, Paul, I love Paul. And I did this word study or this topic study. Paul is constantly reminding everyone, do you realize what a jerk I was? Do you realize how wretched I am?
Yeah, present tense.
Present tense.
Yeah.
He doesn't say even wretched man that I was. He says wretched man that I am in Romans 7. who will deliver me from this, right? So I take solace in the fact that all of these people in the Bible are working out their salvation in fear and trembling. They are on this road of sanctification.
Yep.
And so I know that tomorrow or the next day, when I wake up and have that thought, when I wake up and have that desire, when I may even fall, like my story, and I get to this, like, includes relapse, right?
Yeah.
Is I take solace in the fact that the Bible has laid out all these stories of people just like me.
Yeah.
I don't use that as an excuse, right? Romans 6, right before Romans 7, tells us don't go on sinning so that grace can abound more, right? So if I'm using that as an excuse,
Sure.
which, by the way, I did at times, right? I'd be like, everyone has their own struggles. Mine just happens to be drinking a little bit too much. What is drunk anyways? Because some person had decided it was 0.08. Like back in Jesus' day, maybe it was something different. They didn't have breathalyzers back then. I mean, you know, we do all this stuff, right? So I take solace in the fact that, and I hope people listening to this take solace in the same fact that, like, sanctification is not just a fancy word. It is literally there because it is the reality of what we are living every single day. We are not who we were yesterday. We are not who we will be tomorrow, right? And it's just like the stock market. It's up and down and up and down. But over 10 years in the stock market, guess what? Like, look at it, what it was 10 years ago.
Yep.
It's higher than or it's lower than what it was today, right?
Yeah.
And so I think what I hope people take from my book, what I hope they take from this podcast, is that whatever your sin struggle is, the gospel makes room for it, but also the gospel is not just for a one-time decision. Say like salvation is a lifeline, but sanctification is a lifetime, right? And we need the gospel every single day. And so I'll end with this, is the second part of the answer to your question about how do I kind of go on and you know, realize I'm a child of God. It's recognizing and it's having the humility to know that I am literally one decision away from being that person again. Like, I am literally one decision away, one night away from being that guy swimming in his own filth. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that if I drank tomorrow, that I would immediately be that person. You might be able to look at porn tomorrow and not be the person you were 5 years ago. But here's the thing. I know that's where it leads, right? If I were to start drinking again tomorrow, I don't think I'd be back to the person I was. It might take a year, 3, 5, 10, but I know where it leads, and I know how consumed I will become of it because for years I have the evidence, right, that's where it leads.
Well, Jon, thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through your story, and I think for also, you know, putting this to paper is just such a beautiful thing that we need in our world as people that are engaging in that radical vulnerability. That's a whole other podcast talk. We can't go there today, but just thank you for engaging your story. I think one of the things that we lean into is that when we get to do this together and when others get to participate in seeing us be vulnerable and love one another and to share those deepest parts of us, that's where we get to heal and grow and share. And so thank you for opening up to us today and for introducing our communities to the work that you put together, which is just a beautiful, beautiful depiction of God's grace for us sinners as we process through this. So, brother, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. If anyone, you know, wants to reach out and talk about this or whatnot, obviously, you know, they have you guys, but, you know, they can reach out to me. Just go to Christian Alcoholic. There's a form on there,
Okay.
ChristianAlcoholic.com, and I'd love to talk with you.
Yeah. And you have podcasts?
I have a podcast called Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic as well, where we talk to people who have, I say similar stories, but different stories as well. Because my hope and my goal is that in hearing other people's stories, you will see yourself in someone's story, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it kind of breaks down that comparison game, which is important. But then also talk to clinicians and counselors and people in the medical field and whatnot to kind of even get a better understanding of what's going on.
That's awesome.
Amazing.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for listening. If you want to learn more about 423 Communities or get connected with us, go to 423communities.org and follow us at the links in the show notes or the description below.